of the India Forum. He was editor of Economic and Political Weekly, Mumbai between 2004 and 2016. He has been in the media since 1988, writing on economic affairs, first with Deccan Herald Bangalore and then with the Hindu Chennai and Hyderabad. He has a PGDM from IIM Calcutta and an MPhil in Applied Economics and a PhD in Economics from the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. While based at the Center for Developmental Studies, Thiruvananthapuram, he co-edited with M.V. Ramana Prisoners of the Nuclear Dream and authored Demonetization and Black Money. So now may I now request sir to please come on the stage and start the conversation. May I request both Mr. Aakar Patel and Rammanohar Reddy to please come on the stage and start the session.
Thank you everybody for coming for this second session. I would like to, I don't think I need to introduce Aakar Patel, who while we were waiting for this talk to begin, about half a dozen people came and said they were fans of his. They took photographs of him and they got their books, copies of his books. He's also spoken in Hyderabad before, not at the literary festival, but about, I think, 2018 or 19 at the Manthan Samvad. Very briefly, since, you know, we need to, for those of you who may not have heard of him, he's been a writer, an editor since, I think, the 1980s. He's held a number of positions. He was the editor, I think, at Midday, when I write Aakar. Then more recently as a columnist in a number of papers, the Mint, the Hindu, Business Standard, and he has a syndicated column. And now he's been writing books, a number of books. And of course, he has been chair of Amnesty International India, in which he has tried to highlight various human rights issues, because of which over the past 10, 15 years, he's had some difficulty, let's say, to put it mildly, with the authorities. If I can, we are here today to discuss his novel, if I may ask, perhaps his first novel. It's called After Messiah. To begin with, Aakar, this is, it's after the Messiah, okay? It is about, I mean, to give the audience a brief overview, I'm not going to give you the detailed plot. It's about many things, but in a sense, it's about a person, a woman who happens by accident to become a legislator in a country which is not named. You know, we can think it's India, we can think it's elsewhere. And she, by accident again, after the Messiah, she becomes the Prime Minister, okay? In that situation, she is confronted with moral choices, decisions she has to take about her work, decisions she has to take about her personal life, including her daughter who gets arrested because she's working with the displaced. So there are many, and it's a very slim book, but it has, as I keep saying, I would like to say it has many layers to it. And one small interesting thing is that there are hardly 5-6 characters who have names. You know, there are about 20-30 characters in the book, but only 5 or 6 have names. You know, of course, the central person, Meera, has her name is Meera. To begin with, if I can ask you the first question, Meera, as the Prime Minister, you know, she inhabits a world which is all black and white. Okay, but the way you have described her situations, it seems as if she has to take decisions which are not black and white. You know, she realizes that the world is, I mean, at least the decisions she has to take are not black and white. Is that because you're trying to tell us that, look, reality is much more complex, even if we are living at a time when issues seem black and white?
Yes, so the background is this. When on the 9th of March 2022, which is just short of 2 years ago, there was a news report which said that India had accidentally fired a missile into Pakistan. And we were not told this. After 2 days, when the Pakistanis complained and so on, then India said कि वो गलती से छूट गया है, वहाँ पे जाके गिरा है. So somebody commented on what an interesting novel it would be to write about modern day India, where you've come back from work, maybe you're having your dinner, you're watching TV, and you turn the TV on, and the leader says that at 12 o'clock, in about 3 hours time, 4 hours time, your money is worthless. आपका पैसा है वो you go and get it changed tomorrow, day, next week, next month. So this kind of beautiful thing doesn't happen in too many democracies, you know. Missile accidentally goes and falls in a country. And I felt I should write that novel. So the problem with my writing that novel was that there was no movement in characters, because that was more like a TV serial where all the people are the same. The leader is the same. There is no shift in character from the first year that the person takes office to the 10th year. And I don't know how many of you have seen this series called Yes Minister, where it's the same kind of people, or this, the sitcom called Friends, where all the characters remain the same. Joey remains Joey and Phoebe remains Phoebe. But in a novel, you need to have character movement. And I wrote about 12,000 words of the previous, of that old idea of this wild place where things are happening, like, you know, a currency is being abolished, missiles are taking off by accident. And I couldn't go forward. So then I threw that away, and I began with something slightly more granular, which reflected slightly more deeply what was going on around us. And one advantage I had to answer your question directly is that, having spent most of my life in either business or journalism, the last few years of my life have been spent in what is called civil society, where I've been working with people who are very different from me, very different from most of us, and are quite ethical in the framework that they hold. And it's both unusual, particularly for a Gujarati, because for me to meet somebody who's not really interested in money, who's not interested in the personal thing, is quite strange and new, but also wonderful. And I think that meeting that kind of person made me feel that I should write a book where somebody who holds onto values which are deep, this woman, engages with a world that is less responsive to what she thinks and believes in.
Yeah, actually, I should have mentioned earlier that Aakar mentions in the beginning of this book that much of his work has been inspired by working with people who have been displaced in mining areas, etc. And that's one thing that's specifically mentioned in the book. I'd like to come to that a little later. Before that, about the Messiah itself, it's called After the Messiah, and in this book, the Messiah dies on the second page. Okay. Now, what is interesting is that in the book, in the fictional book, the past is, it's in the past. In this fiction, the Messiah is in the past. But in the present, as it were, you're dealing with both the past as well as the present, in the sense that the Messiah is looming over the horizon. He has his imprint all over society and politics, and Meera has to deal with that. Now, this mixing of the past and present, is it a literary device in a way to get around an environment of self-censorship, or to keep the mob at bay, rather than talk about the Messiah as if he was living, talk about the influence he has on politics as it's happening today?
No, the mob is sort of relatively easy. The good thing about my fellow Hindutva followers is that they don't read books. What turns them on is tweets and Insta posts. So as long as you write books, you're okay, because they're not going to read. Amit Shah is not going to read a book. I can tell you that. Or get angry about what's written. So a book is a safe place to be able to say what you want to. I think for writers, material is important. And very few democracies offer this kind of glorious kind of messianism, oh, somebody has come to save 1.4 billion or however many we are. We don't know because there's been no census. Maybe it's 1.5, I don't know. So you need, writers should, I think, look around them and put down material which they are faced with rather than write about something which is not directly related to the lives of their readers. So I felt that I should do that in fiction, having already done it in non-fiction. The problem with non-fiction is that it's boring. That if you write about the economy, in 2019, India's per capita GDP went below Bangladesh's. Nobody disputes this. These are government figures that go to the World Bank publishes it. It's not as if in 2019 some miracle happened. In 2014, we were about 35% ahead of Bangladesh. We were at $1,500 nominal per capita GDP. They were at $1,100. They went ahead in 2019. They've remained ahead for 5 years. They will remain ahead of us in the near future. Is this a subject of politics in India? No. Because it's boring. Like, acha nikal gaya to nikal gaya, kya kare abhi, you know? Or like, we are 1.4 billion, so we have more money than them. We have more cars than them, so we are fine. So if in that kind of culture, in that kind of population, I think it's important for the writer to try and reach more people through material than just the non-fiction.
To go back to, the people, to tell the audience, a community which has been, marginalized, the lands have been appropriated, the forests have been denuded. They are characters in the book. They are there always. Meera has worked with them in the past. Her former partner also worked with them years earlier. Her daughter, who is a lawyer, works with them, and because of that, she gets thrown into jail. But they appear rather late in the book. And in a sense, they are the moral spine of the book, The resolution of the story depends on the moral and ethical decisions they take. My question to you is that, did you think of, given how much they have meant to you in your own life, in your work, did you think of writing a book about them rather than bring them in as principal characters in this political drama that was taking place?
Yeah, I live with them and I work with them. So I think it's important that their work be characterized at a point when this country has more empathy for such people. I think if we allow 82, 83-year-old men to die in jail without conviction, they've not been convicted. We just don't want to give them bail. If we want to keep our professors and Sudha Bharadwaj gave up her US citizenship to live in India. I don't know anybody. I know two other people. Sonia Gandhi is one, Jean Drèze is the other. One of them married and had to do it, but I don't know too many desis who do this. But instead of understanding where this person is coming from, why they are so attached to this country, and by this country I mean this country's people, that to love India is to love Indians. It is not to necessarily think of the cartographic aspects on the map. One of the weird things about being in civil society is that on our Signal and WhatsApp groups, half the people are in jail. So there is some. I think that like a lot of the responses are sort of expected, but they can't be given because they might come after 4 or 5 years. I'm too involved with them and too much in love with them to be able to write about them directly. But I hope to be able to at some point.
Yeah, but having said that, as I said, the resolution of the novel finally depends on the choices they make. It's that's the way I saw it.
That's very true. If you meet these people, they're sort of really interesting. I have this lawyer in Surat, one
Could
of
you tell
the
us which, these are people in Odisha or you worked the community or in Madhya
all
Pradesh?
of them. The community in Raigad, which is this village in this district in Chhattisgarh that I went to, where the Adivasi women were leading. So there's this beautiful phrase called ash pond. Ash as in कोयले से जो बनता है ash, pond as in a water body. What it actually is a pit about the size of this entire complex. Maybe 3 acres, maybe 4 acres, maybe more than that. 10 acres. Being a city boy, I don't know what necessarily acre means, but very large, black. And if you've seen Lord of the Rings, it's like Mordor. It's unrelenting, dense black. And that's the material that's piling up next to your village, comes into your village with the water. And it comes because people are burning coal to make cement. And the land that you hold, it might not even be in your land, but it doesn't have to be. It'll come from below the ground, it'll come through the air, and there is very little recourse that they have to fight this. There's something called the Coal Bearing Areas Act, which Nehru left us, which says that the government can pretty much take over any part of land in this country that they feel has minerals underneath. And sort of hand it over to companies, including the government's own companies. I guarantee you that if coal were located tomorrow under Malabar Hill or Jubilee Hill, there is zero chance that the natives would be kicked out of their land and the companies and the bulldozers sent there. This only happens because we, people like us, people like me, want the energy resources to fund our lifestyles. And for that to happen, other people have to suffer. But to meet those people was for me interesting. I'm glad that I did it, even though I was in my mid-40s by the time I did. But it's astonishing, the kind of resilience and courage that these people have. And the language is such a beautiful, I couldn't understand a word of it. There was no direct communication between us. They didn't speak Hindi either. They only spoke whatever the Adivasi tongue was. But to watch them at work, to watch this woman's power and her strength and her will was remarkable. My hair's standing on end remembering it now. It's fantastic. A lot more of us should meet such people, and I thought I should write about such people.
Yeah, thank you. That really comes through in the book. But I must tell you, there's a lot of wry humor in the book as well. There are episodes where legislators are caught up in a resort and they're taken away in buses. There is also a Jayesh Bhai who keeps files of persons of interest. Okay, Jayesh Bhai has a son who's no good but who's being promoted. Then there's a Swamiji also, but none of them have really names. Any connection with the living is purely coincidental. If we could move away from the book now. This is your first novel. It's a political novel. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have that tradition in India, in English, of having political novels like the way it is in England or in the US. But having said that, I mean, you would think that in today's world, where there's so much tumult, there's such changes taking place around us, socially, economically, politically, there would be more literature of this kind. But I don't know if I'm mistaken, but I see a certain change. There are books emerging which are commentary on today's society. I don't know if you've read this. This is Quarter Life by Devika Rege, Anjum Hassan's History's Angels, and this other book which is going to be discussed later today, Siddharth Dubey. Do you see a change in that happening? I'm not asking whether your next book is going to be another political book, but do you see around us, people say that it's in the darkest of times that the finest literature emerges. So will we have some kind of, do we see something like that emerging?
I think so. I think that the writers need material, like I said, and I don't know of a better time in India for writers than the last 10 years have been. And this will produce this, but to to go back to where you started, I think it's right that the Russians, just before the revolution in the late 19th century, a lot of how Russians understood Russia came from novels. So if you read, say, for instance, Crime and Punishment, uh, Dostoevsky talks about the communes in Paris, he talks about the decline of religion, he has a lot long conversations between two people talking about ethics and morality and things that not necessarily the stuff of fiction writing. But that's how he and that's how Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Turgenev communicated to their people what they felt their society was. And I think I was quite disdainful for most of my life about fiction because I felt it like, why should you have to invent material when it's right in front of you? I was a journalist many decades. I had not encountered this category of violence called beef lynching, not even once. It began in 2015 after the Prime Minister's opposition to what he called the Pink Revolution, and then two states responded by criminalizing the possession of beef. Maharashtra, which was then run by the BJP as it is now, Haryana. What the law says is that if I am accused of possessing beef, it is for me to prove that the meat in my freezer or my van is not beef. And to tell you why that is unusual is that if I were to shoot Ram next to me just now and he were to like fall and like hopefully die maybe and there's a smoking gun in my hand, the police, the commissioner, is he still here, would have to prove that I did it. But if I'm accused of having beef, I have to prove. And what that has resulted in is something I think fascinating. In 2019, this story was reported in the Indian Express. A man in Gujarat, Muslim man obviously, was accused of serving beef at his daughter's wedding. Police told the court, we can't prove it. Court sentenced him to 10 years, saying that it's for you to show that that meat that had or had not been consumed all those days and weeks ago was not beef. Man said, I can't do it, jail mein jao. The interesting thing is that the judge was right. That is what the law says. You need to prove it. The state doesn't need to do anything. And the reversal of burden of proof is in a variety of laws. Since 2018, 7 BJP states have basically criminalized marriage between Hindus and Muslims. You can't marry. Not in this state yet, but in my state, the one I stay in, Karnataka, it has been. What it says is this: if a person converts after getting married or wants to convert, they have to fill out a form and apply to the collector or to the district magistrate who will give the permission for the person to convert. If the conversion has happened without the knowledge of the government can come and undo the marriage, including marriages that have children, in the case of the state of Madhya Pradesh. And this is a law after 2018. Like, how much better material can writers get? Your country is eating itself in front of you. Your people are doing this to themselves in front of you. And at the one part of you is horrified and shocked, but the writing element is stirred into action, Like, what kind of idiotic nation does this to itself and applauds itself? Look at the ovations the Prime Minister gets for the work he does. And I think that's, to my mind, I have no idea what the question was to which I'm giving this answer. I can't remember.
No, the question, you answered the question that in terms of the material that you have.
So I think that we should do what the Russians did. We should record what we are doing to ourselves as a nation and a society, and we should tell society in every form we can, including tweets and Insta posts, which are just as important.
Yeah, I did think of literature in late 19th century Russia, which is one of the highest forms of literature and what it did. But let's hope that we see such literature and we hope that it brings about change as well. Before I throw the floor, I'm sure there are many questions. I want to ask you, what next? You wrote about the Hindu Rashtra, you wrote about Modi years, you're writing another novel. And you told us how you came to write this novel, but are we going to see more political novels, or maybe a romantic novel, or maybe a chick lit, you know? So,
I have written two-thirds of a screenplay in Hindi, so I don't know whether I'll finish it or whatever. But that's part of what I'm. And then there's a graphic novel I'm working on with this illustrator called Pen Pencil Draw, who's on Twitter. And there is one novel I've begun writing, but I don't know where it will go. Writing is very difficult. So writing is like going to the gym, that you hate it when you're doing it, that after you come out, you feel like, oh, very nice or whatever, you know. So, but when you're doing it, you don't want to, also when you're not doing it and it's coming up tomorrow morning, you feel like, nahi karna, you know, don't set the alarm, band karo, whatever. It's really painful, but it's very satisfying. It's not rewarding in the material sense because India is not a country where books are bought or read. But it's satisfying in other ways, in many other ways that most work is not. I am also writing a non-fiction book, which is not necessarily. So the broad thesis is this: that the thesis is that prosperous nations tend to trade regionally amongst themselves. That if you look at Southeast Asia, 63-64% of GDP is what is called internal trade. China is selling sort of engines to Thailand, or Thailand is selling, you know, tourism to whatever. In the European Union, it's more than 60%. In South Asia, it's 5%. The World Bank says it's more expensive for India to sell and send a Mahindra car to Lahore than it is to send it to Brazil. And this is because we are doing it to ourselves, because we are so honorable that we don't want to sell to the enemy, and we will make sure that fewer of us are sort of employed, but at least they will suffer because they will not get a Mahindra car. So I'm working on that, which is hopefully less boring than it sounds. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. I don't think I'll take up more of time, that although I have a number of more things to say. I'll just end by saying it's a very slim book. It's about less than 200 pages. It's, I wouldn't say it's easy reading, but it is, one can read it. It's very insightful. It has some humor as well, you know, wry humor, I would call it. I would strongly recommend it. It's about both the Messiah and after the Messiah, of course. Yeah, if I can, I just one request, if you could make your, a lot of people wanting to ask, make your questions brief, and of course, yeah.
Sir, my question is that in the situations where the people are uncertain about their future, their children's future, then they expect more to appear for the Messiah, or the situations where everything is perfect. So we can see in the past also, we always expect that something would come and resolve about all issues. So for that Mashiach who comes and sometimes he gave benefits like Gandhi, or sometimes he could take shape of anyone like Mussolini or anyone. So is it possible that first the situations would be proper and stable, then when the Messiah will come, he will resolve the issues of the people, rather than an unstable situation when Messiah can take the route anywhere?
The thing about faith is that it is one of the most powerful forces. You know, when Jesus, like 2,000 years ago, in 32 or 33 or whatever year it was, we don't know, when Saint Paul comes to Rome, comes to Greece, spends a lot of time in Turkey, the message of Christianity that is the most appealing is that he's going to return tomorrow. Jesus has risen and the apocalypse is coming on Thursday or next Monday. And it's 2,000 years that he's not come back. But that has not actually affected the faith of people who believe. There are more people today who believe that he's going to come. I don't know when they think he'll come, than did 2,000 years ago. But that's the power of, that's the magic of faith. It doesn't require anything other than the idea that this person, this embodiment of divinity is going to come and sort it out once and for all. And as long as I have that sentiment, my material life might not necessarily be as important when I'm considering this. the problem is that we are living through a period where you have to mix things like theology and things like sociology and try to explain very basic things. But it's a fact that government data shows, the government did not release this, that in 2018, Indians were poorer than they were in 2012 and were spending less, including on food. Government data. But we have somebody who's really popular who's in charge because of that.
So, considering that India is a secular country, what is your take on the public showcase of the government's religious agenda when most of us common people are asked to refrain from any religious gestures in the corporate world?
So there is, lawyers use these terms de jure and de facto. Like de jure is by law and de facto is as it exists. I don't think any country in South Asia has the capacity to be truly secular. And by secular, I mean that you don't want to bully your minorities. This is our natural instinct. It's a very tribal instinct. It's very difficult to get rid of. Pakistan took the constitutional route. They said non-Muslims cannot become president, non-Muslims cannot become prime minister. We took the non-constitutional policy route. No Muslim by law, no Muslim by law is prevented from becoming prime minister. But it's impossible to conceive of a Muslim being the prime minister of India. It's not going to happen in our lifetime at least, unless it's imposed from the top, as we had in the UPA. So I was in Surat last week to collect my passport, and I had not anticipated the level of excitement and the levels of what is called a millennialism. This is a word that Christians use in their joy, in the ecstasy of some new thing that's going to come. Jesus is going to arrive. It was that level of fervor that I saw when this temple thing happened. And it's very difficult for the state. Gandhi said this, that you can't have politics without faith. And I think that it's true of India. You could have laws that say, for instance, that, let me give you an example, which is unrelated to faith. Let's say Article 19 gives us the right to freedom of expression. And it's a fundamental right. What does fundamental right mean? Fundamental right means a right which enjoys a high degree of freedom from encroachment by the state. The police commissioner cannot come and tell me to get off he can, but he cannot come and tell me to get off the stage and stop talking or like whatever, because I have the fundamental right to speak to you. Do we actually have that right? One would argue, no, you don't have it, because there are many laws that curb it, a criminal defamation, a criminal contempt, 153A, sedition, and so on. So while we want to believe, since today is the 26th of January, the Constitution is a document that we should look on as something we are constantly moving towards. It should not become a sacred text, which we matha teko to, but we don't read. And we don't follow. Nobody knows what is there in the Rig Veda. Nobody read it. But we think it's really nice, it's a good book. Maybe it is, I don't know. I have not read it. But I have read the Constitution. I think it's a set of rules, it's a code. We need to follow it, we need to move towards it. Is that happening in this country? No. Has that ever happened in this country? The other side would say, I would agree with them, likely no.
Yeah. So I have a question from the novel. You say that the state is a violent project, and so you say that the state is a violent project, and that line bothered me for quite a while, because what I feel that state is a myth. It's an organization, just like an organization is a myth. It's we the people who are part of that state. And those, especially those who are part of the state, why do you think they become cruel? Is it the power that makes them cruel against the people who do not have that power? Because again, it's the same human beings. It's the same sapiens that we all are. So what is it exactly that makes the state a violent project? And I have another question as well. So what is it about your love for Mr. Modi? So Ashoka the Great, Modi ji the inaugurate. So the love that comes across for him. So I want to decode that as well.
So, what we inherited, and this is not a new observation I'm making, this is known, is a state structure that the British developed over 90 years, which is centered around law and order and revenue collection. The state represents these two things for the most part. The way that we encounter the state is through district magistrate and collector. Collector of what? Collector of our cash. If you read the constitution, the most important elements in the constitution are the footnotes, not the words of the constitution itself. Why am I saying this? As I said, 19(1), Article 19, or let's move on to another one. Article 25. After very long, involved and intense debate, the makers of the Constituent Assembly gave Indians the right to propagate. Why? The Christians, the Christian community, which was represented by this man called Frank Anthony, who was a Anglo-Indian who set up a chain of schools, they said that our faith requires us to spread the word, the good word of Jesus, and to say that he's coming. It is an article of our faith. Can you please give us this right to propagate our faith? It was debated and it was comprehensively won. Ambedkar in his draft, instead of the word propagate, uses the word convert, right to freely convert. When the draft finally comes, it has propagate, but the debates make it clear that there is no distinction between the two words, and Ambedkar doesn't have anything to say once the word is changed. He was satisfied that the way the article is written, that I have the right to freely practice and propagate my faith, necessarily meant that Christians have the right to convert. What happened in the 70s is that Congress governments in Orissa and Madhya Pradesh introduced footnotes, through the footnotes in the constitution, ways in which to stop this. Today in India, the right to propagate is both a criminal offense and a fundamental right. The state is saying, jao aap, Jesus ki baat karni hai, jao, and the moment you do it, jail mein jao. You know, that it's bizarre that you have a fundamental right that's also, if you look at the way that churches operate in, say, Jharkhand or whatever else, in small homes, constantly raided. You can't have a prayer meeting without somebody coming barging into your house. We had this problem in Karnataka in 2021, where mobs would come into homes, into churches, and stop a prayer. To go back to what you were saying, it is that the state wants to control the right. Bandobast, lathi charge. These are not democratically words used in other civilized, in most democracies, people are not scared of the police commissioner or the police or the havaldar or the thanedar. We are, and we should be, because they have citizens have very little. We are actually subjects. But till we claim those rights that are given to us, we will remain a state with an inverted constitution where the rights are with the state and the citizen is at best tolerated on sufferance, and many citizens not even that because of their faith. To the second point, I think I've met Modi, and he's been really warm to me. It's very rare that one gets the opportunity to write about, study, and observe somebody of this level of approval. That's the first thing. That it could be somebody, the US has these presidential candidates who come in jokers costumes and so on. There's like a side show, I don't know if you know about it. He's not like that. He's really popular and thinks of himself very seriously. Like he thinks of what he wears. What person would wear a suit with his name written on pinstripes when he meets Barack Obama? I think that is wonderful. Like to just that as a character study, like a 5-year-old, like Baba suit, like naam likha hai, like just in case he gets lost, I don't know. But you have to love somebody like it might come out of insecurity also, but I'm saying that we have to be sympathetic towards such a person. I am, and I want to write about him.
Hello, sir.
One thing I must say though, that after that incident with the pinstripe suit, many people said that it is a very rare misstep of his, and I don't think he's done anything like that after that.
which is a shame because I really like that suit. मेरे को भी चाहिए.
Hello, sir. Sir, what liberties do you feel you could take as a fiction writer as opposed to a journalist, or did you feel restrictive? So I just want to know during the writing of this novel, what was the relationship between your journalist self and your fiction writer self?
Uh, okay, so maybe I'll talk about my writing process. So I normally write in the morning about 2,000 words, and then I stop at lunchtime, and then I don't write after that. It's not been that different for me writing non-fiction from fiction, except for the fact that fiction, for some reason, I write longhand. So the pen takes me somewhere, and then I don't know where it's going. It's difficult. There is this beautiful essay called Against Sombov, where the process of writing is being explained. And the person says that writing is a process of osmosis, maybe like sweating, that you try really hard but nothing's happening and then suddenly the sweat comes out. It's like that and by this I mean a fiction writing. It's more difficult. You need to be much more alert to other people, the way they look, and be good at being able to describe things in a way that appeals to somebody who has not seen that person. Dialogue written in a way that appeals. Yeah, I would, on the whole, say it's an order of magnitude harder to write fiction than it is to write non-fiction. Non-fiction, you're just filtering material. The World Bank tells you that Bangladesh is gone in front, you know. With fiction, you have to imagine a character and give her life, give her soul, which is not easy.
As someone who has followed you, read your column, heard you speak several times, I'm personally very, very happy that you and your book both are safe because bhakts don't read. But then we are also aware that one distorted meme of your book would be enough to turn their heads. Now, I'm coming to my question, that's precisely the cohort that should be reading books like yours. So how do we make that happen? Because they don't read. But they read what is propaganda, what is completely, distorted. So how does one solve this problem?
Yeah, thank you. No, I should say this, and I'm not saying this merely because I'm here or but the largest set of people who come and listen to material that's not necessarily popular tends to be in the Telugu states. I don't know why that is. And I have come to, not just to Hyderabad, but to many other towns and cities. You normally get an audience this size almost exclusively in the Telugu speaking states. And I don't know why that is. To connect that to what you said, yes, you're right. They do tend to access material, whether it's video, audio, or text on WhatsApp or like whatever else. How does one change that? I don't know. I think one problem is that if you try to oppose sentiment with logic, logic tends to lose. Because I think passion is a much more important feeling than somebody saying, GDP ka data ye hai, 0.7% kam ho gaya, whatever, nobody cares, like, because it doesn't mean anything to me. Whereas if I'm saying that, this is a nation that has taken its place amongst the pantheon of great nations after 1,000 years of slavery, that tends to, I might get bored by it, and I am, but it might appeal to a lot of people who might feel that that's necessarily the case. Lastly, I should say that all of us who write should ask ourselves whether we are doing more to communicate ourselves to more people. And if we are not making that effort, whether through language or medium, we should ask ourselves whether that's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Aakar. I'm sorry. Okay, very briefly, the last question.
Yeah, so my question is that on this point that they don't read, but I am afraid that they're building an intellectual class, a quote-unquote intellectual class of their own, with, say, Vikram Sampath coming out with this book, with Jai Sai Deepak writing something. So is that trying to just replace and come up with a structure of their own? Do you feel that's happening in the literary space?
Maybe the court will always have jesters who amuse and entertain the court. It doesn't mean that the problem is that if, there's this lovely phrase about the Romans who felt that the Greeks were almost, the Greeks, meaning the ancient Greeks, were constantly blabbering on about the past. They had very little interest in what was in front of them. But 600 years ago, this is where Socrates would have met Plato. This is where, Euripides showed his great drama. They had very little interest in the fact that Germany and Italy and everybody else had gone past them. But so long as they had that fantastic thing in the past, it was sort of good enough. It is to understand Savarkar is not difficult. We just have to read one book, Hindutva, that's it. That is, he puts down what he says about what he feels about non-Hindus. To understand, I don't know the other person you named, but I'm saying to understand whatever these millennial projects are, go to the sources. Golwalkar did not write anything, but his speeches are collected in one book, Bunch of Thoughts. Deen Dayal Upadhyay, the ideologue of the BJP, never wrote a single book. What is called his work is a set of 4 speeches. You can read it in 1 hour. So I'm saying it's not that they are needed. People who are justifying the fact that Muslims cannot eat or marry or stay where they want to or what they want to doesn't require an external person to justify. You can just read what the BJP itself says, which is one reason perhaps why you don't need to have. Why do you need to write a book when your thesis is I hate Muslims? Nothing else. You don't need to say anything else beyond that.
On that note, I'm afraid we have to stop. I'll just say that I hope you'll come back to HLF soon, to Hyderabad soon. I also hope that you'll write more books, political books, other books. And I just want to tell the audience that the number of publications he was telling me which are carrying his columns is shrinking. So one Hyderabad publication that does carry his column is the Chronicle, I think, So I hope we can read his material every Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, in the Chronicle. Thank you, Aakar. Thank you very much. And thank you, all of you.